Stephen? Morning, guys.
Check. Angela, can you hear us okay? Check, check, check. Angela, could you give us an audio check? And they also need to get the video.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hearing you well now.
Good, good. Yeah, I had it turned on. I think that might have been my device that was giving you some feedback a minute ago.
Okay, great.
Good morning, Bevel. How are you?
You all set? So we're just getting everyone back in from the break. So we should be starting in a few minutes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we could organize that. No problem. Ton of them. Yeah, ton of them. We have probably 4,000 to 5,000. Yeah, and they have organizations, they have meetings and stuff like that. Where we go. All right, good afternoon. Well, still morning. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call us back to attention as we reconvene. Now we're entering into our fourth workshop, which talks about establishing a CSERT. We're going to be given practical steps and guidelines. Our presenter this morning is Miss Angela Dingle. Angela is the chairman of the Board for Women Impacting Public Policy Education Foundation and serves on the board of directors for the Institute of Management Consultants. She's a member of ISACA, the Project Management Institute, and Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Angela Dingle, Chief Risk Officer for Omni Systems, is certified in the governance of information technology and has over 25 years of experience in the public and private sector. I'm not sure it's the same person I just saw on the screen, but that does not correlate. An award-winning business owner, she is a certified management consultant, experienced in information technology, governance, cyber security, critical infrastructure protection, strategic planning, leadership development, management, and process improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning I present to you via remote location, Miss Angela Dingle. Put your hands together as we welcome her.
Good morning. Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me there. Good, good. So I'm going to spend some time with you this morning talking about some practical steps that you can use to establish a CSERT. Is that someone speaking to me? I'll spend some time with you talking about some practical steps and guidelines that you can use to establish a CERT. What I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to allow someone that's there with you physically on site to show you my slides. Can we do that? Is there somebody on that end that can make sure that you can do that? As opposed to me sharing my screen?
Oh, okay, Angela, we'll put the slides up from a computer here and show your screen separately.
Okay, I'm going to send them to Stephen.
Okay, yeah.
All right, good. I'll get them to you in just a second. And while I'm doing that, let me just continue to talk to you guys, tell you a little bit about myself. So all those accolades that you heard, that's all the business stuff. When it comes down to the real work, I've been working in and around information assurance and cybersecurity for the last 15 years or so, and I've watched it evolve. I am here in the States. I'm certain that you guys could figure that out by the time that I started talking this morning, but I've seen the approaches to addressing issues that have to do with cybersecurity, as well as how governments and agencies respond to cybersecurity incidents. I've seen that evolve over the years. And as you all are considering what you want to do with respect to your CSERTs, you'll see that over time, the approaches that you use and the steps that you go about to manage those things will evolve over time as well. So let me just get you these slides and we'll be able to get started here. I didn't realize we were in a time zone difference. So it happens to us sometimes here in the States. All right, there you go. So you guys let me know when you can see them.
Okay, I've got them, bringing them up shortly.
Okay, good, thank you.
Can you share your screen as well, Angela, please? Because then I can get them on the live stream.
Okay, let's see. I will do that as well. All right, so can everyone see those?
Yeah.
Yes, you can see.
Good, good. Okay. So why don't we get started? So now you had a session before the break where you talked about, gave you some insight into what a CSERT is, correct?
Yes.
Good, good. So I won't go through the definitions. I'm going to assume that you have some insight and some background with respect to what a CSERT is. That definition, there, depending on which country you're in and depending on which organization that you're speaking with, they might call it a CSERT, they might call it a C-risk. There's all these different ways that they define that term. For our purposes today, I'm looking at it as a computer security incident response team. And so as I talk about it, that will be the context in which I'm talking. I think the thing for us to keep in mind is that there's no one way of defining it and there's no one way of executing them. And so we'll talk about what those options and things look like over time. So a CSERT is just one of several components that make up a multi-layered security approach. You need what we call here defense in depth. You need technical controls, you need managerial support and operations, and then you need processes and procedures and tools and technology that you combine together to come up with an overall strategy for information security as a whole. And then as you look at each of the different layers, the CSERT is just one of those different layers that you will add to come up with an effective security strategy. So it's going to differ based on the expertise of the people that you have that are able to assist you in establishing the CSERT and running it, the budget that's associated with the organization. So I may take a minute or two and try and get a little bit more understanding of what you guys are doing in your individual areas, because that'll give me some context as I talk about these about these practical steps. So obviously there's some costs associated with that. If nothing else, there are costs associated with the staff that are responsible for responding to incidents. And the staff need technology in order to be able to do that response. And then there could be, depending on what type of incident occurs, there could be some costs associated with attempting to mitigate or come back to an operational state after an incident has occurred. And so there are a number of different resources that you need. And then there are a variety of different organization structures that have proven effective with respect to how people establish CSIRTs. So before I go to the next discussion, I'll ask if you guys can give me a sense of what organizations that you're in. Are you looking at a national CERT? Are you looking at a local CERT? Are you looking at one within your individual companies or agencies? So my first question is going to be, are you all public sector? Are you working for government agencies, or you work for private sector agencies? Just by show of hands, I can see a little bit of folks in the room. Okay, so so I see one hand up. That's for public sector?
There's a mix, Angela, of public and private here. We have a few government representatives as well as other orgs.
Okay, good. So you've got a mix of both. So on the government side, are you all considering doing something at a national level, or are you looking at doing something within specific agencies?
Haven't decided as yet.
Nobody has decided as yet. So hopefully I'll be able to share some information during our time together today that will give you a sense of that. For those of you that are working in the private sector, tell me what you're thinking about. Are you thinking about something for the entire organization that you're working with, or for a specific department or a specific function?
I work at the airport, and the airport is owned by the government, but is operated by a private management.
Okay.
And the IT department has its own autonomy. So what I'm considering, what I'm going to be proposing to my supervisors is that we do something in-house to set up to protect the airport infrastructure.
Okay. Good. I've seen a similar scenario like that where the government actually owns the airport, but it's a private sector company that runs it. Anybody else?
Another one here is internal to the organization, but organization-wide rather.
Okay, organization-wide. And so is that the individuals that's doing it at an organizational standpoint? Where are you in the organization? Are you within the IT, in the ICT department, or?
Supervising the IT department.
Okay. So good. We've got a variety of different methods that we're looking at. And so we'll just kind of walk through these and talk about some practical things that you guys can do. So the one thing that you want to keep in mind as we talk about the steps that you need to go through and the things that you need to do to implement is that one size doesn't fit all. Not all CSIRTs are created equal. It will depend on the staff that you have and the level of expertise that the staff has. I can hear someone speaking. A question?
No, sorry, Angela, can't go ahead.
No worries. It'll depend on the level of expertise of the people that you have on your staff, the financial and technical resources that you have available to you, right? Because you could have a vision of having a very large or a CSIRT that has a broad mission, but it's really going to boil down to the resources. Not all CSIRTs have the same mission. Some of them may be focused. So for instance, the gentleman that talked about the airport, it may be focused specifically on what's going on at the airport. It might be focused on there are 2 to 3 different ways that CSIRTs operate. One is very proactively, so they are actively educating and looking for incidents and trying to mitigate them. One is reactive. Obviously, an incident occurs or a disaster occurs, and the CSIRT has to respond. And then there are CSIRTs that have overall security management functions. In particular, what I've seen in government agencies is that there's an overall CSIRT that's responsible for gathering and collecting and being aware of all of the different types of incidents that occur. And then individual response teams may respond to a specific incident when that incident occurs. So they provide a function that is a combination of both reactive and proactive ways of managing information security. And part of that security management function also becomes, preventive care. So making sure that people are both educated and aware of what their security practices and procedures are, quality. So making sure that security is incorporated into new systems that are being developed, even as new training is being developed for personnel, security becomes a component of that, so that it becomes an overall management function. And when security becomes a management function like that, you obviously want it to be at the highest levels within the organization, whether that's within the government agency or whether it's in a private sector organization. So just remember, as we go forward, some of the things that we talk about today will be applicable to the organizations that you're in, and some of them will not be applicable. Okay. Any questions before I go forward?
Nope.
So I will say to you that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This has been done before. There are a lot of resources that are available to you to help you to walk through the steps that are necessary to establish a CSIRT. So if you work for an organization who's not really done any of the steps that are necessary to do it, my advice to you is just don't reinvent the wheel. Don't start from scratch and start building. Because there are resources that are available for you to use to build your practice. Right. So what I'd like to do with each of these steps and guidelines is really just so there are a number of different categories. So I'll talk to you about 2 or 3 points that you need to think about. And then in the room, I'd like you guys to just talk about what that looks like for your specific organization, such that when we get to the end of the day, you have at your disposal some notes and questions about things that you need to go and ask so that you can start to build your plan around your CSIRT. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Good. All right, so one of the key things that you have to do with respect to building a CSIRT, and these are in no specific order, and that's the good thing about this process. You can, if you are, is anyone familiar with maturity models, like a capability maturity model? Show of hands, I can see faces. So if you're familiar with capability maturity models, it really is based on this concept that we can measure how mature an organization is against a set of baseline standards. And when a new organization is attempting to implement those standards, once you understand where they are, you can meet them where they are at whatever level of maturity they are and move from there. And so for each of you, it's going to be key to understand where you are in terms of maturity currently, and what you need to do what you need to put in place to move forward. So one of the keys that you need to do is to identify stakeholders and participants. So it sounds really good to say that you want to have a CSIRT, but you need a number of different things in order to make that come to fruition. So you need to determine who needs to be involved. And so when I say who needs to be involved, what's the first who are the first types of people that come to mind when I say determining who needs to be involved?
What are the kind of people that you think need to be involved? That's
in a CSIRT.
just call it out. Technical persons in IT.
Right, definitely technical people.
Let's get some feedback from the room. Policy makers.
Certainly.
Legal persons,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the insurance companies or somebody from the insurance sector.
Mm-hmm.
We have business process type people.
Definitely. Also financial folks, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so the people who are holding the purse strings.
And law enforcement.
Law enforcement, certainly. So that's a lot of your stakeholders. What about your, I'm sorry, those are a lot of your participants. What about your stakeholders?
Could you elaborate on that a little, Angela?
So who are going to be the recipients of the services that the CSIRT provides?
Okay. Government and industry.
Mm-hmm. What about the general public? So the gentleman that talked to me about the airport, who are your stakeholders? Who does the airport serve?
The general public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the general public. So a lot of times when, again, CSIRTs have all different types of purposes. If it is one that is designed to protect internal resources, then those are going to be the types of stakeholders that you discussed before. But in the instance of the airport, that's going to be an external stakeholder, right? So it's not just the person who works at the airport and has to use the infrastructure, but your CSIRT may have a responsibility to take into consideration incidents that would affect the general public that traverse through and use the services at the airport. So as you are thinking about the CSIRT, you'll want to think about those kinds of things. And my suggestion would be, as you start, just think about the sky being the limit, because then you can scale it back to something that's reasonable based on the resources that you have at your disposal. One of the common failures for people that set up CSIRTs is that they really haven't thought through who their stakeholders and participants are. So they get some of the people involved in trying to set up and manage and plan for the CSIRT, and then they miss a key component or a resource that might have been an asset to them or may have a stake in how successful the CSIRT is. And as a result of that, then you get some failure. So if you guys could just take a few minutes and kind of think about what that is, just make a list for yourself. And I'm hoping that you have pen and paper available, because I'll be telling you to write down lists of things as we go through. Take a minute or two and make a list of the stakeholders and the participants that you think would be appropriate for the CSIRT in which you are considering establishing. So we talked about a couple, right? We talked about finance and legal and law enforcement and management and your technical people and policymakers and legal folks. You guys will let me know when you're ready.
Ready?
Okay.
Well, I think we have a comment here.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to remind persons that we're into workshop mode here now. The seminar part of it is over. This is not one-way traffic from Angela. This is us putting a list together of the things that we want to see in our suit. That's what she's asking. And she said, get your pen, get your paper out, put your ideas down, and let us get a record of the things that we believe are important. This is the mode where we switch into now actually creating the basis for a national suit. This is the fun part of the symposium. So let's make the most of it. When Angela makes these requests of us, the onus then becomes on us in the room to ensure that we're actually documenting the thoughts that define the foundation for the first St Vincent cert. You all with me? Right, so this is work part, sleeves up, idea hat on, let's get to work and make sure that we're doing what we're being asked to do here, right?
Thank you, Bevel.
You're welcome, Andrew.
So then I will give you slightly different instructions. So think about the National Cert for St. Vincent, and I need you to think about who those stakeholders and participants are, right? That's going to be a combination of public and private sector, the general public, private citizens.
One of the things that we discussed this morning is a decision still has to be taken about what's the best approach. Is there going to be a single national cert? Are there going to be separate industry certs? So that's one of the things that the list that you just asked them to create may well help us to make a final decision on. So there is no, well, as far as I know, there's no consensus that we're going to have a single cert to rule them all.
Okay, so let me tell you how to one other way to think about it. So one of the things that has begun to work well in the States is this partnership between the public and the private sector with respect to security. Because the threats are coming from a number of different fronts, and they're affecting both our public government agencies as well as the businesses and the citizens that do business with them. So if you guys have followed anything that's happened in the States in the last couple of years, we've had some major breaches around personally identifiable information. So our tax agency was hacked, and millions of records were stolen from our tax agency. And then our agency that handles, it's essentially like our human resources or personnel agency, the Office of Personnel Management. They handle hiring and promotion of anyone that serves in our military, that works for our government agencies, or that serves as a contractor providing services to our government agencies. And that agency was hacked as well, and the hackers stole a significant amount of information. The combination of those two things puts our private citizens, all of our military personnel, and the employees who work for our government agencies all at risk. So there's actually currently, I had spent some time yesterday afternoon talking to companies. The US government is now requiring companies to implement some of the security provisions that they have at the government level. And so that means within a company, we may have to have a cert within our private company, or we may be required to report to a government cert as a way of trying to get our hands around the fact that we're being attacked from so many different vectors. So think about that as you're thinking about who these stakeholders might be. Think about things that you have seen. I don't know the expertise that's in the room. I'm assuming that you guys have some of you have a technical background, some of you may have a policy background. Just kind of think about what that looks like, what the threats from a security standpoint look like from your perspective, because that's what we need. We need everyone. We need all of those different stakeholders and participants to be putting our heads together to figure out what it looks like from our vantage point and what we can do to try to solve the problem, if that makes any sense.
Angela, just want to make a comment here. Roxanne John here. President of the ISOC chapter, St Vincent and Grenadines. One of the things we have in our plans is to establish a CSIRT, but as we learned this morning, we need to go a little bit wider than that. We need to have a cybersecurity framework under which CSIRT will be established. So our plan is really to move in that direction to make sure that we have a framework in place, their policies and plans, so that when we establish this, which most likely will be a private sector industry type, that these industries that we will serve will have their plans in place, because we can't respond to something if they do not have the things in place. So this is a wrong in which our discussion will go. And we have quite a bit of technical persons here and non-technical, which also pop a part, especially those who may be in planning policy field. So we have a diverse group. And while we have government here, and I know government has plans to establish CERT, our concern is more or less from as a chapter profit organization standpoint, that is where we will head.
Okay, thank you. So she brought up a good point about frameworks. If you can recall, I said don't start from scratch. There are a number of cybersecurity frameworks that exist already. The one that we use here in the US is something called NIST 800-53. It's based on, it's a federal framework that we also apply to our private sector companies, but it aligns very closely with the ISO 27002 standard. So there's an international standard that exists already that you can take a look at that provides a framework for all the various different components that you need. So for those of you that are non-technical, the things that you need to do from a security standpoint are typically broken down into families of tasks that you should perform. So a set of guidelines around how you should establish user accounts and passwords. And those things are called account management, and a family of guidelines around how you should do physical protection. So what types of locks you should have on your server rooms, what types of things you need to think about in terms of who can get access to and physically walk up to one of your servers that are in your rack. And those are in a family called physical security. So there are frameworks that exist already that you can take a look at. Again, you don't have to start from scratch. Look at those, see which things are applicable, because there are hundreds of controls in those frameworks. Not all of them will apply to your cert or even to the systems that you're managing, but it's a good place to start so you're not just starting from scratch. All right, so I'm hoping that you guys have started to come up with a list of stakeholders and participants, right? So you want to know who it is that you're going to be, who are going to be your stakeholders, who has a interest in the CSIRT. You want to think about who it is that you're going to be serving or supporting. So the type of response that you might provide for a private citizen might look different than the type of response that you would provide if you've got a partnership with law enforcement, for instance. And so you need to be thinking about that as well. And then in the same vein, who do you want to coordinate with? So I'd suggest that if we're talking about a national CERT, actually, if we're talking about any type of CERT, you want to coordinate with law enforcement. So you'll want to have them involved in the conversation. I know in some of the Caribbean islands, the police departments have a forensics department that would be very supportive and assistant and able to assist a CSIRT. So you might want to have a conversation about them and start to have some discussions about how you can coordinate on response to an incident should it occur. All right, so then let's talk the next step. And again, the steps are not necessarily in order. How many of you guys are familiar with formal project management practices? Let me see a show of hands there. Okay, so a couple of folks are familiar with that. Then you know that in order for a project to be successful, you've got to have an executive sponsor. And I will tell you that establishing a CSIRT is no different. It's a huge technical project, right? So that means that you've got people, processes, and procedures that need to be implemented. You need a budget associated with that. And anytime that you establish a project and you don't have an executive sponsor, there's a high likelihood that that project is going to fail. So depending on the structure of the organization that you're in, an executive sponsor doesn't necessarily need to be a decision maker. It's very advantageous to you if that person is a decision maker, but you really need a champion, a person that believes in what it is that you're trying to accomplish, that has the connections to be able to talk to the right people and articulate the vision of and the mission of the CSIRT in a way that will allow you to get sponsorship, to get the support behind the effort that it will take to stand up the CSIRT. So given that definition of an executive sponsor and the fact that this is a project, how many of you all have an executive sponsor for your CSIRT currently? I don't think I see any hands there.
Yeah, there weren't any.
Okay, so that's going to be key. It's going to be key to trying to understand to whom this is important, right? Find the person within the agency or the organization that you work with that's going to support you as you try and build this concept of a CSIRT. What I have found in managing projects over the years is people have different motivations. And so for someone being the manager who stands behind the establishment of a CSIRT might be something that helps them to promote their career. It might help them to achieve a personal goal of something that they want to do from a personal standpoint. It might also be a way to get some control over if you've had incidents or there's a lot of confusion about what's happening with security. It might be a way for that individual to wrap their hands around it and start coming up with a process that works. If you've got infighting that's going on between one department and another department, having an executive sponsor can allow you to have a more informed and a reasonable conversation about what needs to happen moving forward. So I'm going to task you guys, each of you, to right now kind of think of 3 or 4 people that you might want to have that conversation with about being the sponsor for establishing the CSIRT. And then your first task when we're done is to go back to your places of work and start working on identifying that executive sponsor, because you won't be able to, you might be successful, but it's difficult to be successful without some support for what it is that you're trying to do, because you need a variety of different resources in order to make the CSIRT happen. So I'll give you a minute or 2 to do that.
Okay, so let's start getting that done again. Want to identify 2 or 3 persons who could possibly be sponsors for our CSIRT initiative.
You can let me know when you're done.
Got them? Good. We got our sponsors. Potential. Yep.
Good.
Okay, I think we can go.
Good. And once you've got those sponsors, then you need to get an understanding of what the sponsor's expectations are, right? So again, it might be that person has some personal goals that they want to achieve. It might be that they've been tasked from a regulatory standpoint or a legal standpoint. Maybe there's been a problem that they need to address. So if you're the point person for getting this CSIRT initiative started, you want to have a conversation with whoever that executive sponsor is, so that you get a good understanding of what their requirements are. What is it that they think the CSIRT is going to be able to do? Because in particular, if we're talking about a person that does not have a technical background, they may have an expectation that's just not realistic. And so you want to get a sense of what that is so that you can properly manage expectations associated with the CSIRT. And you'll also want their support so that you have the time and the resources necessary for you to be able to plan out the implementation of the CSIRT. And so it's going to be key. It's going to be key to once you've got that sponsor, to get them to announce it, right? Because if you start asking questions about what people's roles and responsibilities are, or you might be trying to collect information, which is one of the steps that you have to go through in establishing a CSIRT, and people haven't been told why you're doing that, you might get some resistance. People are just naturally resistant to change. And so if you've got an executive sponsor who has announced that that the CSIRT is being formed, then that should give you the backing that you need to be able to have conversations with people that are in either other organizations. If you've got an announcement from your executive sponsor that you're setting up a CSERT and you need to go and talk to someone in the police department or in the legal department, for instance, it just gives you the kind of push that you need to be able to have those conversations without any pushback from people. Okay. All right, and then just like any other project, you want to have an overall strategic plan or project plan. And so with that, you're going to need a planning team because it can't just be the technical people that are trying to establish the CERT. And again, not in a specific order. You may have some other tasks that you've been performing and gathering information, but once you start this process of trying to formally implement the CSERT, you want to have an overall plan. And so what are some of the components of a strategic plan?
I can use them. Objectives. I think that was objectives. So
right.
they some feedback on the components of the strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. So you need a set of objectives. What else do you need in a strategic plan?
Or PM experts.
Yeah, need some project management experts. So a strategic plan is going to be different from a project plan in that a project plan is going to be your tasks and the milestones that you need to manage to. Your strategic plan is going to be looking at the overall strategy for how you want to handle the CSERT. So let's say we're talking about a national one. One of the components, the first thing that you need to think about is, well, what's the mission of that national CSERT? So a strategic plan is going to have a mission statement associated with it. It's also going to have a set of goals. So assuming that we had a national CSERT with a mission to protect or to detect incidents and respond to incidents associated with here, our government domain is .gov, right? So let's say we were talking about forming a CSERT whose responsibility is to handle all of the domains associated with .gov. That could be a mission statement for a CSERT. So then what do the goals and objectives look like associated with being able to manage that domain? And then once you look at the goals and objectives, then what are the tasks and the milestones and the deliverables that would need to be associated with being able to do that? So planning for establishing a CSERT is not very different than planning for a project. It's got all of the same different components that you would have for a project. You just need to think about it in terms of the mission. So take a couple of minutes and think about what you think the mission of your CSERT would be. Anybody know how to develop mission statements? Okay, if we have any takers that want to give us your thoughts on what you think an appropriate mission might be.
Anybody wants to feedback on that? Taking a crack at your mission statement. I think we have one. Can we get the mic to the back row?
Good morning.
Good
So
morning.
my mission statement would be to identify and to be able to combat whatever cyber criminal activities that may be happening.
Okay, good. That's a great start.
Okay. Well, our for the information technology services division will be to same thing combat and for the GUI network, because we would want to look at the entire government network and deal with
Okay,
that.
perfect. Thank you.
So for mines, it would be to reach out and plan and develop security measures for our clients to help them to be more secure as they apply web-based technology more in their businesses.
Good, good. Great. So those are good starts, right? So once you've got your mission, then then you need to figure out how to actually execute on that mission. And so your strategic plan for the CSIRT will have those components associated with it, as well as actual project tasks that need to be executed. And so in the same way, you would, if you were approaching any other form of project, you want to have a project lead assigned to manage the overall the planning and the implementation of the CSIRT. That individual might be your sponsor. It might not be. Typically, your executive sponsor is not going to be the same person that's the project lead, but there would be a project team that consists of that executive sponsor along with the project lead and the other resources that we talked about when we were thinking about who the stakeholders are. And so my advice would be to you with respect to coming up with a strategic plan that you follow some pretty formal project management best practices as opposed to trying to define it very loosely. The CSIRT, like other ICT projects, can just be a little overwhelming sometimes for people who don't have a background in technology. And so if you can put something in writing in front of a person, and it might just be a picture, because a picture can speak 1,000 words. It might be that you have a very you have a documented strategic plan that you use as the project lead to work with the members of the team. But when you're communicating to non-technical people or to senior management or with the general public, you're using a graphic or a diagram or something that helps them understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. For example, just this time last week, I was at another conference and we were talking about cybersecurity. And there's an overall, and you guys are probably familiar with this, Bevel, you can tell me, the single ICT space for the Caribbean. While there is a very detailed document that's been defined that talks about all the steps and the timelines and the costs and the resources that are associated with doing that, one of the participants in the room said, it would be really nice if we just had a graphic. Can you just create a graphic for us that helps us understand how this whole multi-discipline process all comes together? So that's another thing that you can think about with respect to your strategic plan. Any questions about that before I move forward?
Okay.
So you'll want to, thank you. You'll want to start gathering information. And so there's lots of information that you'll want to gather. In particular, from a technical standpoint, the first thing that you can start doing is looking at any incidents that have occurred. So have there been any security incidents that have occurred that you're aware of? So you'd want to talk to your system administrator. So this is when you're getting down into the technical details, right? So who are the people that are managing your desktops and your servers and your routers and your switches? Who's managing your infrastructure? Your network engineers, your system administrators, your software developers. Have a conversation with them about what incidents may have occurred in the past or things that they're aware of, so that you get an understanding of what the threat landscape looks like. So you might want to make a list of who those people are so that you can start finding out which incidents have occurred in the past. You also want to try to get an understanding of what their needs are. So sometimes CSIRTs are created because it's the right thing to do, in other instances, like I explained to you all for what's going on here, you might be required to establish a CSIRT either by policy or by law. So as this single ICT space is defined, eventually there will be policies and procedures associated with how a CSIRT has to be established and when and by whom. So you want to start collecting those things as well. If there's any existing laws on the books, so sometimes your police departments will have laws on the books about either things that have to do with financial transactions, things that have to do with child welfare, things that have to do with theft, that may assist you in understanding the types of things that you need to be aware of from a CSIRT. It may also give you the leverage that you need when you move forward with how you want to respond to an incident should it occur. So let's say you have an incident that occurs that is that's financial in nature. Someone hacks into one of your financial systems or something like that. You know, the banks may have regulations that are applicable that you want to be aware of, and then you'd want to call law enforcement so that they can go after the bad guys and try and get the money back or stop them from taking much more of the money that exists. And you also want to understand the requirements associated with your stakeholders. So what would assistance look like? What type of support would a member of the general public need with respect to the CSIRT versus what would the, let's say the tourism department, the tourism agency, their website got hacked or something happened from a tourism standpoint. So what do you think their needs and requirements would be with respect to a CSIRT? What do you think they would expect a CSIRT to do for them? So take a couple of minutes and think if you are aware of any rules or regulations or policies within your current agencies or within the private corporations that you work in that might be applicable. And then try to come up with what you think some of those needs might be for the individual constituents.
Can you just repeat that question, Angela, or the instruction?
Yeah, I'm wanting them to start to think about and make a list of any existing rules or regulations or policies that they think might be applicable that they would need to gather. So let's say there's an existing policy about the use of computers for an employee that works for the government. That would be one of the rules or regulations that the CSIRT would want to have at their disposal. Because if we use that as an example, let's say there's a policy that says if you are using a government computer, then you can't download illegal music on the government computer. The CSIRT would want to ultimately be able to detect when that's occurring, and follow up with your personnel office to say this employee has violated this particular policy or procedure associated with the use of computer technology. And so what's the penalty associated with that? Or is it just a matter that the CSIRT, now that they can see that thing happening, they completely block it so it can't happen anymore? That makes sense to you guys?
Yep.
Okay.
So can get some feedback, some examples. Can we get the mic over?
Well, first of all, you have to look, as you said, the internal policy in the organization in terms of use of internet, the IT infrastructure, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. Then you also have to look at the national policies in terms of the ministries, what policies they have in existence to the governance of ICT in the country. And then you have to look on the books, the law books, on what kind of cybersecurity or cyber law is existent in the country. And then you may have to go regionally, because in the Caribbean, we have a lot of things that are inter-governed. Like, for instance, there's the existence of NTC, and National Telecommunication Regulation Committee. They govern a lot of the IT policies in the region. So then you have to go over to the regional infrastructure in terms of those laws and those policies.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had another comment.
Right. I was thinking more along the line of business continuity plan, to see if that need to be reviewed with regards to the incident that has happened, and also risk assessment review or risk continuity, well, risk resolution, like what was in place and if it resolved the issue, and if we need to maybe review the time it takes to do that, to resolve the issue, if it met the plan that you had, assuming that you had a plan. If you don't have the plan, then you'd have to put those structure in place so that does not occur, or alleviate at least some risk involved.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And so you want to gather as much of that information that you can. You want to go and you want to look at the laws and see if there are laws available. You want to look at any existing plans, because remember when I started talking about this, I said, don't start from scratch. There are artifacts and little bits and pieces of information that might be available to you, and you just want to do information gathering, get as much of that at your disposal as you can. You can start building out a matrix of what resources that you have at your disposal, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there's no need in developing a new process for doing business continuity planning. If there is a business continuity plan that exists somewhere, use that as your framework, and then just start to follow that process and refine it as necessary if you need to. The same thing with your disaster recovery plans. I mean, the fact that you guys are there in the islands, there are probably more than one disaster recovery plan that's available that deals with a number of different things, ICT being one of them. So you'll want to go and look at that, because there are probably some resources that are available for you there. And then you can align what you're doing from a CSERT standpoint with what the overall disaster recovery plan and strategy would be. And
right.
Also you want to be go ahead.
No, well, you go ahead first, Angela. I was going to ask for if anybody had any more examples, but can go ahead.
I think I see a hand raised there in the back.
Yeah, there's oh.
Yeah, so I talked about human resources, right? So you'll want to go and talk to the people that are doing the hiring, because there are probably some rules in like an employee handbook, or in a, if it's a private sector company, they might have a code of conduct or something like that that kind of gives you some guidelines on what people should be doing from an ICT standpoint and from a security standpoint already. And then you can either enhance them, or again, you simply, at this point, you're just gathering this information so you know where the gaps are that might need to be addressed from a CSERT standpoint. And then did you have a comment, Stephen?
No, just checking to see if we had any more. We got 2 examples so far. Anyone else in the room want to throw out a couple of policies? No? Okay. Oh, we do have one more.
Mhm.
In terms of other policies that the CSIRT will be looking at, this will be maybe preemptive strikes, like stuff doing like vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, doing a contingency as well. Before, trying to align the policymakers and the technical staff along the same line and the same vision point, because a lot of times the ones that create the policies aren't the one that implement them. And because the policies that are in existence, they kind of hurt the IT or technical staff when they're looking to respond to a particular incident or occurrence in breach of cybersecurity. Because, let's say, for instance, because of policies, I have to contact at my organization. I may have to contact, let's say, the CEO before we can investigate a breach in security in the server. The CEO may at any given time. And while I'm trying to contact him, instead of getting directly to the point and getting the intruder out of us, waiting for him to respond to us, to an email. So they do a lot more damage than if we were allowed to just take them out one time and then start to fix the problem that they caused.
Certainly, you're breaking up a little bit, but I understand that completely. And that's why when we were talking about stakeholders, it's really important to get all the right people involved so that you have a conversation about that. The CEO is probably thinking about order of command, like, since he or she is the decision maker, they should be the ones that decide. But the CEO also needs to understand that from a technical standpoint, waiting for however long it takes to get him or her on the telephone is not necessarily the best way to be able to solve the technical problem and stop the damage that's associated with the security incident. So when you look at business continuity and disaster recovery and incident response plans, one of the things that you want to do is put an escalation procedure in there. So what we commonly see here is that an incident has to be reported within an hour. So if I am a general, I'm a general person, I'm using my computer, I notice that there's a virus on my computer, within 1 hour, I need to notify the CSIRT that that has happened. The CSIRT in turn has a responsibility to notify whomever the senior official is, whether that's the CIO or the CEO, within X number of hours as well. In some instances, that's 4 hours. Depending on the severity of the issue, it might be 24 hours or it might be within an hour. And so in having the CEO involved in the discussions as you're planning on how you're implementing the CSIRT, then you can help him or her understand why it's important for you to be able to respond. Because ultimately, you might need to shut off access to some things in order to be able to contain a security incident. And you don't want to have to wait for a phone call or a response in email from the CEO in order to be able to do that. So as you're doing this information gathering, that's a time that you want to have a conversation with him or her to see, well, what is it that, as the CEO, what is it that they're really getting at? What is it that he really needs? Is it just that he needs to know that the incident has occurred? Or is he looking for you to get some kind of approval before you can address it? And I would venture to say that a CEO that truly understands the damage that can happen as a result of a cybersecurity incident would want you to address the problem first and then report to him or her later on. So that's why you want to have as many people as possible involved in the discussion. The other thing you want to think about, that you want to find out, is whether or not anyone has attempted this before, because you want to learn from their mistakes. Or you might even want to have whomever that is on your team to help you to try and get to the next step very quickly. So I don't know if any of you guys have had anyone that attempted to set up a CSIRT before.
I'll get in some feedback here.
From what I've been hearing is that it does sound like we have a CSIRT in our organization already.
Okay.
With the structure we have under the ISO, because we do that. We have the incident and so on, I mean, I don't think that we have something like a time to report an incident, but we have that you can report it. It doesn't have like a time, for example, report it within an hour. So I could take my time and report it. And I think that's probably something we ought to review, given that the knowledge I have now. But it really does sound like we have a reporting structure already. So I think we have to do a lot more research into the CSERT and then match and see what we have that is a shortcoming or anything like that.
Yeah, good. So you'll just want to, if you've got one that's performing some of the functions that need to be incorporated and not all of them, then it's just a matter of identifying the gaps and trying to fill the gaps. And so for all of you, your reporting structure may not be an hour, but you definitely need a reporting structure and you need an escalation path, because sometimes the answer is to completely shut down a function. With our tax agency that I talked about here in the States, the portion of the agency that got hacked, that feature is no longer available. It is completely offline. Nobody can access it anymore because the damage was so bad. And it had the hackers had been into the system for almost a year. So when you find out something like that, you need to be able to get it escalated to the right person so that they can make a decision to stop the bleeding right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do like the idea of incorporating persons who might have worked on the initiative before. I think we heard examples through the room yesterday of people making attempts at getting stuff done that haven't been successful to date. Those would be good persons to recruit into some of these teams to learn from those experiences, but also use the initiative that they took initially as part of what's happening right now.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys have some policies. You got some research that you need to do as you are working on thinking about your CSERT. So for those of you that have some component of it already, you just want to get a sense of what you're covering. And for those of you that don't, just go in search of policies and people and resources that might know something about what has been done in the past, what types of incidents are currently occurring, and what policies there might be available to support you in your efforts to set up the CSERT. So a CSERT has constituencies just like a company or an agency does. And when you're thinking about the constituency for the CSERT, you want to think about the types of services that you're going to provide to them. So the example that I gave you earlier is this partnership now between the U.S. government and companies that want to do business, so private sector companies that want to do business with the government. So there's this requirement that so every year the companies have to tell the government, and this has been interesting because it took some time for people to agree that they wanted to do this. And one of the issues associated with the CSERT is trust, right? If I tell you that there's a problem with my network, I tell you that we've had a security breach, then what are you going to do about it? Especially if you're a regulatory body, are you going to then, am I going to get punished for that, or is there going to be some penalties associated with that? So they have this process where we have to, on an annual basis, we have to look at a subset of the security controls that are generally applied to information systems. And we have to tell them whether or not we think that we have any vulnerabilities. In return, though, the government has begun to tell us what their vulnerabilities are. So on a regular basis, we get reports that say, hey, someone tried to hack the electrical grid, or someone tried to get into our water systems, or someone tried to bring down one of our systems, or we're starting to see this pattern of behavior where people use bots to send out phishing emails to all of the employees within a company, telling the employees that the HR department, the human resources department, needs some of their information and I guess that would be a ministry for you guys, that the personnel ministry needs some information, trying to trick the employees into releasing their phone, names and social security numbers and things like that. So given this type of relationship, the type of service that I need from that CSERT is what I'm getting now. I need them to tell me the kinds of incidents that they're seeing in the same way that I'm telling them. And in return, we provide each other with technical resources. So if they if they are aware of a new piece of software or hardware or technology that's available on the marketplace to help us to address that particular risk, then they'll tell us about it. And if we have a product or service or a method that we've used to resolve the issue, we do the same. So that when you think about identifying the types of services that a CSERT would provide, you also need to think about it in terms of who your stakeholders are. So then what does that look like for me as a private citizen? As a private citizen, I'm trying to think if I get any services from a CSERT. I don't know that I get them from our government as a private citizen, but I certainly get them from CSERTs of organizations that I do business with.
Yeah.
So the insurance company, for instance, has a CSERT. Matter of fact, I got one from the bank the other day. So the bank that we use had some form of issue. They didn't articulate what all of the issue was, but they sent out information to us saying, this issue has occurred. We've addressed the issue. If you want more detailed information, here's the phone number to call as opposed to a link to click, right? Because if it was a link, I probably would not have clicked it in the first place. A phone number where you can call and get additional information. And just as a precaution, we'd like you to do A, B, and C, right? So when you think about your CSERTs, take a couple of minutes and you guys can share your thoughts with me about what types of services you think your CSERT would provide.
All right, so I think we have examples in the room of the airport, government, IT organization in a company. Let's see if we can, as well as the rest of persons in the room, let's take a few minutes to just write down the kinds of services that our CSERTs would provide. Thinking about the stakeholders and those who are going to be benefiting, as well as partnering or interfacing with the CSERT. Yeah, sure. We have one question here.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, good day. Oh, John. Yes, I have a question.
Could you state your name?
Oh, my name is Maurice John. So the question I have is, does CSERT have to do things like actually teaching people what being infected by a virus is, these simple ground level information dissemination? Do we have to get involved in that? Because
you don't have to, but a lot of CSERTs do.
Okay, because I've seen cases where I've gone to institutions, and for one classic example is where the manager of the institution, their computer was infected with ransomware, and it was for a long period of time they are trying to open files, and they can't open a file on the computer, and they just think it's regular. And after a while, there's a big message on the desktop. If you want your files back,
you gotta pay some money.
Right. So simple things like regular people are not IT people, so they'll see things wrong with their computer and dismiss it completely. And those weak nodes in the whole system will definitely cause problems. Something as simple as bringing a flashlight, a flash drive from home, plugging it into your system, and you infect the whole system. That infection is not because we just don't know that it's an infection and it's happening. So is it a huge responsibility on us to actually teach people what infection looks like? And how do we actually go about that? That will require a bit of heavy lifting to go around and teach everybody, okay, this is what happens when you have a virus. This is what happens when you have ransomware. stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it's one that everybody is struggling with, right? Because so one statistic I shared last week is that you mentioned ransomware. In addition to using ransomware to attack people's computers, the hackers that use ransomware are now using mobile ransomware. The Caribbean and Latin America is the fourth largest growing mobile community in the world. So you guys are ripe for people to take advantage of all of the individuals that are now using mobile technology to do their banking or go on social media or stay in touch with their friends or look for services. So there is almost like as technology practitioners, we almost have a moral responsibility to teach people about, I call it cyber hygiene, right? So, the kids that are using their phones to go on social media, or that senior executive who's sitting in his or her office and knowing that the computer, well, I don't know if they know it or not, but it would seem odd that every time I try to click and open the file, the person, the file doesn't open and they never say anything about it. We do annual training. And that annual training can be something as simple as we use virtual reality to play games. So the person is being trained on how to think about security by playing games. So almost like you have a joystick, so the person walks into the building and they see a flash drive that's sitting around somewhere. Do I pick up that flash drive and put it in, think, oh man, I got a prize, let me put it in my computer because now I won't have to, email my files to myself? Or do I understand that by having that flash drive, I've now introduced some risk into the organization? So that's one approach for trying to deal with training people. The other thing, Bevel did a conference I think that might have been this year, and during the conference, for each of the subject matter experts that were talking about security, there was these little 1 or 2 minute snippets that were recorded, and those things are now available on YouTube. So you can use those as like public service announcements to help people to understand what, just the basic definition of what cybersecurity is. You can do little postcards, so little 3x5 postcards that just have, 3 things that people need to be aware of from a security standpoint, like change your password every couple of days. Don't use the same password on your personal computer that you use on your work computer. Don't write your password down on a piece of paper and stick it on the front of your computer. So there are a couple of different, creative ways that you can use to educate people about security awareness. The regulation that I told you about that we had to implement here in the States, we don't have an option. We have to do annual training. And depending on what type of work that you do with our government, there is an inspector that comes in to look at what that training is. So we have a combination of those things. We have little, sometimes we'll send out like just one PowerPoint screen that just has a story or a picture on it. And we just do that throughout the year as a way to make people more and more aware of what cybersecurity risks that there are. But from the CSERT perspective, it is to your advantage to educate people about security so that you don't have to do so much work. The more they know, the less theoretically, the less problems that they will introduce. And phishing is a huge one. Mm-hmm. I always include some phishing because the people that are doing phishing are becoming more and more sophisticated with what the emails look like. And so it just becomes extremely tempting to click on them. I've been in security a long time. I had one that someone sent me this year and it actually tricked me into taking a second look. I actually teach this and it was that sophisticated. So yeah, I think you need to do some training. And you get to decide how you want to do that, whether you do that with a little video clip or whether you do that with a little postcard. You might make, I don't know, like I said, little postcards or little stickers, or just, send out an email going, hey, this is just your reminder for the month, not to write your password on a piece of paper and stick it on the front of your computer so everybody can see it, right?
Right.
Yep. So as you're thinking about the services that you provide, you're also going to need some partners, right? So if you are providing services to protect the ministries, well, let's say we're talking about a national CSIRT, then that means that you also need a partnership with law enforcement, right? You're going to need a partnership with your financial institutions. You're going to need a partnership with your utilities. So a lot of times I've seen that conferences of this nature are sponsored by the utilities, by either the telecommunication company, telecommunication ministry or company, or people that are in the energy sector. Might be, sometimes here we see it with the banks. The banks are, so there is legislation there are new cybersecurity regulations in the banking industry that actually will assist you as well as you go about setting up a CSIRT.
All right.
Right.
Would you get those kind of situations here as well, in which the CSIRT or the CSIRT initiatives, training exercises, and so on would be taken, the lead would be taken by industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you want to determine how those constituents would obtain the services. So it might be that you have a ongoing meeting, like let's say once a quarter or once a month with whoever your partners are, just to see how the partnership is working. It might be that we have a insider threat team that on a regular basis takes a look at, do I need to explain insider threat?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay,
so an insider would be a person who has either a current employee or former employee of the organization for whom you work. It could also be either a current or former service provider, product or service provider, or someone who has a understanding of what your internal policies and procedures are. So let's say you have a system administrator that used to work for you. That person represents what's called an insider threat because they understand how you administer your servers, and should they decide to switch over to the bad side, could be tempted or motivated to use their knowledge to cause harm to your ICT infrastructure. So for insider threats here, we have a team that meets on a quarterly basis, and that team consists of some of the stakeholders that we were talking about to look at all of that. And we're looking at things like if it's an employee, from a personnel standpoint, and you've got to be careful that you're then not treating people unfairly. So we have laws that prohibit us from treating people unfairly. But research has shown that people that are under a significant amount of stress, either financial stress, like they don't have enough money to be able to take care of themselves or their families, with all of the storms and the disasters that have happened for you all, that can put a tremendous amount of strain on an individual, and it might make it difficult for them to perform their day-to-day responsibilities on a regular basis. And that might be simply because they're just exhausted from having to try and deal with the disaster, or it might be that they're angry and disgruntled. At any rate, we have a conversation with the human resources people to say, are you seeing any trends that are happening in that instance? Because if that's the case, let's try and get this person some help as opposed to waiting until they make a mistake. So let's say, there's been a number of incidents where a person will have forgotten to log out of their system or forgotten to, change a particular function, and it caused a problem. If that happens once, that might not be a problem. If you start to see a pattern of that happening, and that's what the CSIRT is there to look for, if you start to see a pattern of that, then you want to be able to do something about it. So you need to talk to your different constituents about what that partnership looks like. And then if it is if someone is receiving services from the CSERT, well, what does that look like? So right now, the services that I receive from our government CSERT is we receive notifications of incidents that have occurred. We receive information about threat vectors from a technical standpoint. So they will tell us what a virus signature looks like, and they will tell us what they've done to try to mitigate that. They might tell us where to find a software patch, or they might give us a script or something that we can run to either protect our systems or go and detect that thing has happened. So that's how I obtain services from that particular CSERT. So think about, just kind of think about what kinds of services and how you might how the constituents might obtain those. And so that information, we receive that information from email. So it is either an encrypted email or a password protected email. And it comes to a specific point of contact within our organization.
All right. So we have only a couple minutes before we break for lunch. So let's see if we can get some quick feedback from the room as to just some ideas about how about the services and thoughts around how they're going to be provided. So we have one person here.
Okay. Well, some of the services I think a CSERT should actually provide, as was mentioned before, education, vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, a response plan, a response action, IT policies for the organization. Remember, the CSERT can develop a plan for organization. The CSERT can develop a plan for the organization, and the response is the action. Yeah. IT policies, ethical hacking, pen testing, forensic analysis of a network and of an incident that has transpired, and monitoring of high risk or high target networks. Yeah.
Those are all really good. And so the things that the services that you've defined there are a broad range of services that cover those three areas that I talked about. You're looking at security management as an overall thing when you talk about the policies and procedures, and by doing vulnerability assessments and pen testing, right? You're helping your constituents to be proactive about incident response. And then you've got some reactive services that you're talking about providing too. So when an incident occurs, then you've got a response team that takes action and tries to mitigate and eliminate whatever those security incidents are. So thanks for sharing that.
Do we have any more examples that anybody wants to share? No? All right. I think we can take a break here then. There are a few more of the practical steps which we'll go through after the lunch break. But at this point, we're going to break for. Right. So let me hand over. Well, thank you, Angela, for part one.
You're welcome.
This was part one of our practical steps and guidelines, and I'll turn over to our moderator.
All right, so yes, thank you very much again, Ms. Dingo. Well, we're gonna break for lunch now. Remember, lunch is downstairs in the lunchroom, and we shall reconvene at 1:30, yes? 1:30 it is. So I wish you could have joined us for some Caribbean delicacy, but perhaps next time. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So thank you very much. See you back at 1:30.
I'll see you guys soon.